Oh my god, I actually remembered what my password to this channel is. Yeah, sorry for not posting much over here. I've kind of been uninspired lately, but now that some of the dust has settled with the offseason, I do have quite a bit to talk about, and one team that is especially interesting this year is the Washington Wizards, which that's not a sentence that I typically say out loud, but this new front office has been doing a pretty damn good job. They've drafted a couple of interesting young players the last couple of years, but they have also added to the roster with Anthony Davis and Trey Young for basically scraps to get the job done. Although I guess CJ McCollum was so damn good for the Hawks, calling him scraps is a little bit dismissive, but in terms of like really valuable assets, practically nothing was given away to get these two former All-NBA players who still could potentially get there. And with that, plus them of course drafting AJ DeBonsa with the #1 pick in the draft, there's a big wide range, I think, of where this team can be next year. There are people that I've seen project them to be, you know, as high as like a 4 or 5 seed in the Eastern Conference, and then people who are not as high. And there's just a lot of reason for that, because there's just a million question marks about all of the core pieces on this team, except for like a few of the young guys who there still is questions because they're young and developing. But like, I feel good about Alex Sarr. I feel better at least about Will Riley because he was just dominant in the summer league. Justin Champagnie is a cool player. Keyshawn George I really like quite a bit. So those guys I feel pretty solid about. But basically everybody else on this roster is a huge question mark. Trey Young, injuries, height discourse, seemingly being a big negative to his team, being the worst defensive player in the NBA, only played 5 games for the Wizards this previous year, very, very minimal sample size. And there's just a huge question as to who exactly he is at this point, if he was always overrated or if the pendulum discourse-wise just swung such a way and the situation with the roster being as good as it was without him just kind of forced him out prematurely. You know, there's an argument to be made both ways, and with Trey Young, I am skeptical still just because of the I really don't like the fact that he is so heliocentric while being as small as he is. That's actually a bigger criticism that I would have for him rather than the defense, because the defense is well established as being terrible. But like, the real problem with Trey to me is that his offense is oftentimes not even that great because he just has the ball all the time. And, you know, when you're a 6-foot dude who is relying your game almost entirely on drawing fouls or hitting difficult jumpers and floaters, you're going to have a lot of games where you're not getting to the line and the jump shot is off, and at that point you are just a massive negative to your team. Where Trey Young falls in terms of being the guy who got them to a conference finals a few years ago versus being the guy who seemed to hold them back, hard to say. I would definitely lean towards probably closer to the bad player than the good player. But a lot of this is also very much determined by what the rest of his team looks like and how much he is able to set them up. With Anthony Davis, the question, is it even fair to say it's a question? It's not really a question with Anthony Davis as to if he's going to have injury issues. It's more so the degree of them. Are we going to get 30 games in the season, Anthony Davis, 60 games in the season, Anthony Davis, 50 games, something like that? That matters a lot. Also, the on-the-court product with him varies pretty drastically based on if he's dealing with a lingering injury. He oftentimes plays injured. The dude's bones are just made out of glass, so odds are you're probably not getting more than 50 games out of the guy. Odds are that you are going to just have to be able to deal with both of those guys, because that's the other thing. Trey Young's also been injury prone. There's going to be plenty of opportunity available to the young players on this team just by virtue of the fact that those guys are going to miss games. You know, the one concern that you could maybe have for Trey Young on this team is that ball handling and creating responsibilities will be so heavily determined by him that he, you know, kind of puts training wheels on these players so that when he's not there, the playmaking doesn't get developed, the ball handling, like what an offense looks like with AJ DeBonsa leading it as the lead ball handler. You know, you want to have opportunity for that, and I think the opportunity for that will show itself just purely based on the fact that Trey Young will probably miss 20 plus games. I think a lot of it is, of course, going to come down to health, but then Trey Young's not old, but he's not a young player in the NBA anymore, and then Anthony Davis is just straight up an old player in the NBA at this point. So I think there will be two, like, pretty distinctly, like, the pre-established all-stars with a lot of question marks around them. They'll be in that camp, and then all of these young players. And I gotta say, even if we remove Trey Young and Anthony Davis from the equation, I would be very excited if I was a Washington Wizards fan, because regardless of what they're going to do this year, there is a lot to be very excited about. Keyshawn George is a versatile forward. Big fan of his. AJ, I think, has, I'm not going to be the, guess what? AJ could be really good at scoring the basketball. I look at him and I just see a guy who leads the NBA in points at some point. Like, that's a scoring title player right there, especially if the 3-point shot works out. So you got that going. I also think Alex Sarr is awesome. I do have my concerns with Alex Sarr and Anthony Davis's fit together, because Alex Sarr kind of reads as a similar-ish player to Anthony Davis. He's not as big. Him playing the center is more problematic than Anthony Davis playing the center, because I want to say AD probably has 30 to 40 pounds on him. So him playing power forward, there are some positives there, but there's also a touches argument. A lot of the type of offensive situations that you would put Sarr in are the same you'd put AD in, and then AD is the veteran, AD is the further developed player. He's the more well-rounded offensive player. Certainly that mid-range game is a more reliable thing. So I do wonder what that pairing is going to look like, and if Alex Sarr will shrink under those circumstances or actually be a lot better, because taking away the fact that he doesn't have to play the center position, that's a nice change. But even if he doesn't have to play the center position, he now has to play alongside a center, which has its own set of challenges, spacing issues, etc. Trey Johnson, as a lights-out shooter, I think at the bare minimum, he will be one of the better shooters in the NBA for quite a while. Where the rest of his game lies, we will have to figure that out. And Will Riley, as the tallest and somehow lightest, he's 6'9", and he's also 180 pounds. It's just absurd to be that skinny. But the guy has a really reliable jump shot, looks like, has shown some creating ability, and I like what I've seen from Will Riley, both in the summer league and even his rookie year. He was pretty good. So between Sarr, Riley, DeBonsa, and Keyshawn George, I like all of those guys. And you have the guys more on the fringes, like your Cool Ballies. Bub Carrington, I'm not really a big fan of. Tristan Vukcevic, I've had hope for, but his jump shot doesn't really seem to be all that reliable, and that's really where most of the game comes from. And then after that, I do like Justin Champagnie. He seems like a pretty good role player. And then they also brought in DeAndre Ayton and Chris Middleton. Quick spiel on DeAndre Ayton. I might make a video about him just because people love to click on a DeAndre Ayton hate video, but like, I think it's completely over in terms of having a discussion about him being a starting caliber center in the NBA. But I do think that he could get to be like a less good Bobby Portis, a backup 5 who can give you 10 points and 6 rebounds in 18 to 20 minutes, something like that. Doesn't have the 3-point shot Bobby does, but I think the versatile floater range, mid-range game with him still being a solid finisher, even if he's terrified of contact, and an okay rebounder. I do think that for 15 to 20 minutes, he can be a good center. It's a matter of expectation and being a starter. So I don't think that he's that good, but I still think he's probably one of the better backup 5s out of all of the options. Chris Middleton's the first player in the history of ever to want to return to the Wizards, and it's because that's the only team that was going to give them any damn money. He was not good for the Wizards when he played this past year, but he still put up like respectable enough numbers, and he's a good veteran presence. I don't think it really matters tangibly. But as for the overall question of like, how good will this team be this upcoming year? Well, I don't think that Trey and AD should interrupt the development of these young players too much. I also hope that AJ does not become third option just because AD or Trey is there. As far as I'm concerned, he might as well still be the first option, because like, I'm more interested in seeing him take more shots, even if he's not going to be necessarily as good of a scorer right out of the gate. I don't want too much time waiting around with Trey Young and AD doing stuff while AJ's just kind of sitting there. That's, I think, the worst possible outcome for the Wizards is just that AJ and Alex Sarr just don't get the development that they should get because of those guys. I don't think that that's going to happen, but it is in the cards. So I think the ceiling on this team is probably like 50 wins at the most, like a 4 or 5 seed, like I've seen some people project. But if I had to guess, I think they'll probably be a play-in team, maybe a higher tier play-in team, like a 7 or 8 seed as opposed to a 9 or 10. But otherwise, I don't think that they're going to be that good. But there's a lot to be excited about here. And I do think that it's going to be a fun team, which is more than you can say about the Washington Wizards basically ever. The Wizards have just been a woefully unenjoyable basketball team to watch. Not even just purely for being bad. Like, being bad does not necessarily equal being a terrible watch. The Wizards have been a terrible watch, and I think that at the bare minimum has changed. And again, even if they don't end up being that great this year, they're going to be good. I think that this is a new era coming for the Washington Wizards. Now, it's very well possible that they just fuck it all up. That would be very characteristic of them. Also, I'm looking at their roster right now and seeing that AJ DeBonzo was born in 2007, and that bothers me a lot because he is 7 years younger than me. Oh boy. Okay, that's enough of this. That's enough of that shit. All right, that's it. Bye.